The Cadaver Synod, death on trial, a rotting corpse on trial, silence in the basilica, except the whispers of power and fear. You're about to see how politics can corrupt even death itself. In the year 897, Rome was a city of shadows and whispers, of candles guttering in the dark corners of stone churches, where the air itself seemed heavy with suspicion and ambition. Pope Formosus, once a living shepherd of Christ's flock, lay entombed, yet his influence had not waned. His body was exhumed, dressed in papal vestments, and brought before a court of men who trembled at the shifting tides of power. This was no ordinary trial. This was the Cadaver Synod, a spectacle where death itself was weaponized, where the corpse became a judge and symbol of political vengeance. The motives behind this act were both bitterly personal and broadly political. Pope Stephen VI, seeking to consolidate his authority in a fractured city, aimed to delegitimize Formosus posthumously. Formosus had been a controversial figure, accused of ambitions beyond the sacred remit, of alliances with rival factions, and of promises to kings that unsettled the fragile balance of Rome. Yet what is most chilling is not the charges themselves, but the lengths to which men went to assert dominance over a body that could no longer defend itself. This was power projected upon flesh and bone, a grotesque theater of authority. Imagine the basilica, cavernous and cold, the smell of decay mingling with incense and candle wax. A judge of living men presides over a dead man, questioning him, denouncing him, declaring him guilty. The sentence, stripping of papal garments, annulment of all ecclesiastical acts, and the tossing of his body into the Tiber River. A symbolic death layered atop a physical one. And yet, despite the grotesque intent, the corpse resisted the finality, returning eventually to the sacred grounds, a reminder that death cannot always be controlled by human hands. The Cadaver Synod is a mirror held up to the fragility of authority, to the human desire to dominate, to leave a mark, to assert control even over the inevitable. It reflects a truth we often forget, that institutions, however sacred, are made of men, and men are prone to pettiness, vengeance, and fear. The Synod echoes through time because it reveals how power can twist morality, manipulate ritual, and even desecrate the boundary between life and death itself. Historians such as W.S. Monroe in The Body of Pope Formosus remind us that the Synod was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader struggle in medieval Europe, where the papacy was a prize fought over by kings, nobles, and clerics alike. It illustrates a society where law, faith, and justice were instruments, not absolutes, and where symbolism often mattered more than substance. The corpse became a canvas onto which the living projected their fears, ambitions, and insecurities. Consider the human dimension, a man's life reduced to a display for others' agendas. Formosus could not speak, could not defend, yet his posthumous humiliation sent ripples through the city. It reminds us, in a haunting way, that the legacy we leave behind can be twisted, reshaped, or weaponized by others. How many lives today are judged after they are gone? How many reputations are manipulated, narratives rewritten, histories controlled by those who survive? And yet there is a strange poetry in this. Death, which seems final, exposes the limits of human authority. The Synod, intended to destroy, also immortalized Formosus. His story endured, carried forward in chronicles, in scholarly debate, in the imagination of every historian who has shivered at the thought of a man tried from beyond the grave. Here, the grotesque becomes meaningful, the absurd becomes a warning. We can also see in this episode a reflection of our contemporary struggles with memory, truth, and narrative. In an era where social media amplifies judgment, where histories are edited and reinterpreted, the Cadaver Synod reminds us that the past can be manipulated, that symbols can outweigh facts, and that authority is as vulnerable to spectacle as it is to reason. The corpse on trial speaks to a timeless human anxiety, the fear that we can be undone not only in life but in legacy and memory. Philosophically, the Synod compels us to confront mortality not as a passive acceptance, but as a stage upon which human frailty, ambition, and morality are revealed. Life and death intertwine, and in the grotesque theater of Rome in 897, the audience sees the extremes of human behavior: cruelty, reverence, fear, and absurdity all intermingled. It forces reflection. What does it mean to wield power? How do we respect the dead, even as we contend with the living? And ultimately, how do we reconcile our own mortality with the desire for significance, for influence that persists beyond our own decay? As the echoes of the Cadaver Synod reach us across centuries, we are reminded of a central lesson: the limits of control are the limits of human understanding. Authority is fragile, and history, often cruel, preserves the tales of those who dared and of those who sought vengeance beyond the grave. We see in this trial of a corpse the tragic comedy of human ambition and the humility imposed by mortality itself. The dead may lie silent, but their stories speak louder than the judgments of the living. Let the Cadaver Synod stand as a meditation upon justice and morality, upon the boundaries between life, death, and power. It is a story of grotesque theatre, yes, but also a mirror held to our own ethical responsibilities, a caution against the vanity and cruelty that can accompany authority. And in remembering, we confront not only the past, but our own roles in shaping the narratives that will outlive us. Power, mortality, justice, memory, intertwined, inevitable, and eternal. History does not only tell us what was, it warns us what we might become. And in the silent whispers of a basilica, in the stillness of a grave, we hear the enduring lesson: respect life, respect death, and remember that the measure of a society is not in its spectacle of power, but in its humanity. If the story of Formosus speaks to you, to the fascination and horror of human ambition and mortality, subscribe and discover more tales where history, philosophy, and the human condition intersect. Uncover the shadows of the past and see what they reveal about ourselves today.